Hey, everybody, and welcome to the show. This is Two Old Bloggers with me, Dave, and Darren Campbell over there. We've been commenting publicly on your Minnesota Vikings for well over 2 decades apiece, thus the name. And today is going to be no different. We're going to start out with the news in Vikings land, a little bit of schedule, a little bit of player movement, who we got and who we didn't. Then we're going to start to look at things that Quasi might do to get some of those draft picks back next year in the 2025 NFL draft. That'll be followed up by the quarterback room. How are they going to manage the quarterback room? All next on Two Old Bloggers. Let's rock! Vikings First and SKOL presents This Week in Vikings Land with Darren and Dave, your two old bloggers. Hey, everybody. I wish to welcome you to the show. We got Jordan, Przemysław, and I know I butchered that, Travis, Rick, Raymond, and, of course, the Drewster. Drew, you had a fantastic show this week. I appreciate it. Love watching Vikings Report with Drew and Ted. And there's Moosebeard. What a great name. So, Darren, you're not in Yellowknife. Why not?
Long weekend down here in Canada. You guys get one next weekend for Memorial Day, I believe. We have one a week earlier than that. Kneelers Day, Victoria Day is what it's called on Monday.
Peter asked you, have the fires been smoking, or have the fires fired up again because it's been smoky here again?
They have a little. We had an early start. I think there's about 8 active fires in the Northwest Territories. One community's been on evacuation notice, but not alert. So that's the lowest of the 3. Get your alert, your notice, and then your evacuation order. So they're at 3. But it's been an early start. We knew it was going to be. Luckily, we're getting our area's getting some rain over the weekend. The long weekend campers won't like that, but the people who are worried about forest fires will enjoy a little bit of moisture and dampness, and that may help a little. So we'll see what June and July bring.
Okay, sounds good. Are the lakes are cleared? Is the fishing season started yet?
It has started, but there's it's been pretty spooky. I drove over. This may not mean anything to most everybody. You can Google it, but I drove over when I was driving to Alberta from the Northwest Territories. I drove past the rivers and the big Great Save Lake. The water levels are really low because of lack of snowpack melt from the Rockies, and then the rivers that feed into those lakes and are almost bone dry. So there's areas of the Great Slave Lake near Yellowknife where we have houseboats. They are not floating right now. They're on a lake bottom, which is really weird. And then when I was driving across down to Alberta, there's the big, humongous Mackenzie River, which is kind of our version of the Mississippi. And I saw large amounts of shoreline, river bank, which are dry. There's all kinds of exposed rocks on the Mackenzie River, which is a big frickin' river. It is really spooky to see how dry and parched things are.
Mm-hmm. You guys need some rain, without a doubt. It would help. Moisture. Speaking of moisture,
what we got to deal with it. Yeah, moisture. Yeah.
Because we're a Vikings broadcast and we talk about what happens in Vikings land, the land of 10,000 lakes, let's get this started with theme 1. This week in Vikings land.
Where we look at the week's developments, Vikings related, Dave, if there have been any, and this week there have been a few. Some roster shuffles, the schedule came out. Let's get to it.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of the schedule, there it is.
There it is.
All its glory.
Or not glory, depending on how you look at it. And you and Tyler dug into this earlier in the week. Schedule's been out since Wednesday, so I think a lot of people who've watched various Viking shows, the hot takes on this have been out, but we didn't want to ignore it ourselves on Two Old Bloggers, so want to talk a bit about it. And first thing, when you get on these schedules, Dave, I say it over and over, but it's always a little bit dicey to kind of look at the schedule and say, and try to look at how that's going to shake out for the Vikings, because we knew who we were going to play. We knew who we were going to play before Wednesday came. We just didn't know, and we knew where we were going to play them, but we didn't know when we were going to play them. So, but the thing about this is that a team situation right now is going to be different than what it could be when we play the Jets in the season opener or the Rams after that. It's like there could injuries could happen, coaching changes could happen, and an opponent that looks tough now could not be so tough 2 months down the road. So always a bit of a fool's errand to kind of look at the schedule and say, oh yeah, the Vikings definitely can win this one, and but they're going to have a tough go of it after that. But I think looking at, obviously, you look at the first 7 games, Dave, and 5 of those 7 teams made the playoffs last year. That's a real tough start. When you look at the Vikings quarterback situation, we don't have Kirk Cousins anymore. Say what you want about Kirk Cousins, but it was pretty clear what you're going to get from him production-wise, and we'd seen how the Vikings offense functioned under Kirk Cousins for 5 seasons. Now you got, maybe you got Sam Darnold, maybe you got J.J. McCarthy starting, maybe you got both starting at some point in time. But I think the quarterback situation is really uncertain what kind of production we're going to get out of those guys, how the Vikings offense is going to look with either of those guys at your quarterback. And when you're playing 7 teams and 5 of them have made the playoffs last year, and one of those other teams that didn't is going to have Aaron Rodgers available in week 1, it's not hard to envision a situation where the Vikings are like 2-5 or 1-6 coming out of that, if you're really pessimistic and we don't get the quarterback play that we've been used to the past 5 seasons. That's a big concern. And if the Vikings are in that situation after 7 games, like they were kind of similar to like last year when they started 1-4, the chances of making the playoffs, they're almost nil. It's going to be a huge uphill battle. So I don't know how that's, I'm a bit pessimistic and concerned about that start and the schedule itself overall. There was one outlet that ranked it as the 5th toughest schedule in the NFL right now.
Yep, Warren Sharp over at Sharp Football.
Yeah. So, and I think that's something that I think is legit. Looking at, and they kind of base that, I think, on Vegas win predictions.
They do. Warren has a product that he puts out that you could purchase that for all the gamblers on anything on football, from fantasy to everything else. He's got that, and he wins every year. He's right around 60%. And it is one of those things that he makes a living off of. And he's saying, by his analysis and by what Vegas is showing, the Vikings they have a tough schedule. Part of that is because all those playoff teams at the beginning, minus the Giants. And the other thing is he figures in rookie quarterback play. I saw a tweet from him that it's right around 30% win rate for rookie quarterbacks. Now, the question is, we don't know who's quarterbacking, whether it's Darnold or J.J. So it's going to be interesting to see how all that plays out. Now, I've got that And I wanted to give up the odds. As of this morning, from Vegas Insider, which compiles everybody in Vegas, you can see the week one odds. Well, I say you could see the week one odds. It's microscopic on your screen, and I know, and I apologize. But most of them do not have the Vikings favored anymore on week one. They have the Giants favored, usually by 1, which is crazy to me. But they do. And then they've also done the lines for every game, right? Now, not a single snap has taken place.
Yes.
Not as, OTAs are barely underway. They've got lines for every single game. And I know you can't see it. It's too freaking small of text. But you can see the circles. They're in the right-hand column. The yellow one is even with the Colts, is what Vegas has us right now. And the 2 green ones are against the Titans and the Cardinals. That's where we're favored. All the rest, the 14 other games, we are not favored as per Vegas right now. But things change. We all know you can go 13-4 in a season and then the next year go 4-13, or vice versa. That happens to teams in the NFL every year. Now, do the same ones happen? Does it happen to the same teams? No. But there's always one team that does that. Could it be the Vikings this year that they show up better than, what is seen right now? And this will be great to go look back to at the end of the season and see how right was Vegas. Because I don't think they do. But what I would love for this is nobody thinks the Vikings are going to win. I think that's the best place for the Vikings to be right now. Because nobody expects anything, right? And that's when you can come up and surprise other teams. And that's what I'd love to see our Minnesota Vikings do this season, is surprise somebody.
Would be nice, Drew and a few other. Drew mentioned below about we need a fast start. No doubt about that. And certainly, if the Vikings go like 4-3 or 5-2 over that 7-game stretch, that'll build a lot of confidence in the team. That could really keep the momentum going beyond that. When the schedule, at least on paper, looks like it's going to get a bit easier after that. Some other wonky things about the schedule is bye week's pretty early, which I don't like because later in the season, if we're in the hunt, we'll be banged up more, won't have as much recovery time. I like to have the bye a little bit more mid-season, or maybe a couple of games later than that, but you can't do anything about that. We got some stretches where we got 3 straight road games and then 3 straight home games. I don't know what difference that makes, but there is a bit of a slog of being on the road for consecutive weeks there. Really, I think whether this schedule, Dave, was easy or tough, I think how the Vikings do comes down to 2 things. The one thing is quarterback play, which we already talked about. And if big if here, if Darnold plays much better than we expect, if he ends up being the starter, or J.J. McCarthy, if he wins from the get-go, or a couple of games in, a few games in, is replaced, if he plays much better than rookies typically play, say you get a C.J. Stroud kind of year from him, those are rare, but they do happen. Happened last year. Mm-hmm. Maybe it'll happen again, and maybe McCarthy will be the guy that does it. Then that's going to really help the Vikings offense a ton. The other thing, though, also mentioned, I think, about Drew, where he's talking about he's really bullish on the Vikings defense. Again, I think defensively, how good is this defense going to be? Because last year, I think that personally, I was very happy with the Vikings defense and how Brian Flores coached it and what he did with the talent he had. They were the reason we won, got back into playoff contention, really. But then the last 3 games of the year, we couldn't stop anybody. We were playing 3 very good offenses at that point in time, but you kind of wonder from that, has the league figured out the Vikings and defense and Brian Flores' schemes, and is that going to translate into more hemorrhaging of points and yards going into 2024? I don't know. We've added a bunch of guys on defense: Jonathan Greenard, Van Ginkel, Blake Cashman, the drafting of Dallas Turner, bringing in Shaq Griffin. All of those guys, I think that it'll be. Are they going to help make the Vikings defense better than it was last year, and be able to offset the loss of Jordan Hicks and Danielle Hunter? That remains to be seen. But if the defense plays like that top 10 or maybe even top 5 unit that Drew's talking about below, that we another year under Brian Flores' scheme, he's got a little bit better talent, and guys like Greenard, Van Ginkel, Turner has a great rookie year, Cashman, they all make sizable impacts on the defense. Plus, you continue to get improvements from some of the younger guys like Ivan Pace, Josh Metellus, and that sort of thing. Then the defense could carry the offense, carry the team, and we could end up being better than I think. Looking at the team and the schedule with what we have, the quarterback play, Dave, I think we're probably sitting around that 6 to 7 win mark when I'm looking at it right now. But other people have different opinions. I'm sure you do as well. I'm wondering what you think about this schedule and how the Vikings are going to be able to handle it.
Well, I think it's a brutal schedule, the way it's laid out, because we get the 6 out of 7 first 7 games are against playoff teams. They're the back-to-backs, 3 away, 3 home. The 3 home will help, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But I think it's going to be a test. Without a doubt, it's going to be a test. Now, what I think the wild card is, I think Vegas looks at our defense and goes, it's a bunch of no-names. Basically, there's no superstars there, right? You do not have Danielle Hunter anymore. You have Harrison Smith, but they're going, he's old, right? So they're looking at that like that. Then they're looking at the offensive side and go, well, you either got Sam Darnold, who, he may have been 3rd overall pick way back, but he hasn't done anything. And then you've got a rookie quarterback, and nobody expects anything good out of rookie quarterbacks. So I think it sets up for us to surprise. And if not, we live up to what Vegas thinks we're going to live up to. I'm not worried about 2024 as much as I am about 2025. I think that's when the competitive, we're going to compete for the Super Bowl window opens. And whatever happens this year is gravy. So
we always say that, Dave, but then when the games get going, we're like, how come they can't win,
And we'll get upset when they lose, and then we'll cheer them when they win. And, man, what could be, if they win another one. But I think a key to it is that man over there, Brian Flores, and what he does with the defense. Because if this defense becomes, like Drewster says, if it becomes a top 5 defense, we're going to win quite a few games just off of that. Because do you think that just because we switch quarterbacks, we're not going to score points? Bullshit. Sarah brought it up. We had, we lost Kirk Cousins before the halfway point in the season, and we almost won 10 games. So, and that's with Hall, Mullins, and Dobbs last year. And it's just like, wait a minute. It doesn't make sense. And that first part of the season is the toughest. It gets easier on the back end. So if they build up momentum in that first half of the season, and that'll carry through, we should be in good shape as long as nobody serious gets injured. Knock on wood, of course. And I think we could surprise people, which I'm hoping for. I want to. I love when that happens, especially in our own division.
Indeed. Drew, again, talking about how you don't need superstar players all the time. It's just, it's how those players mesh. And I think
how they work together.
Particularly on the defense, Flores has a plan. He's identified guys like Van Ginkel and Greenard, and wanted them on the team for a particular reason and how he's going to use them. And if you look at Greenard and various different stats, but not the typical counting stats, but like pass rush win rate and that sort of thing. He sort of was a superstar player last year. Mm-hmm. But maybe a better player than Danielle Hunter was, even though Hunter had 16.5 sacks.
Yep. Very well could be. It's just we're going off what Vegas thinks. And, of course, Vegas is watching more than just the Minnesota Vikings.
Yes.
That's what we're for, just to watch the Minnesota Vikings. So that's what it is. Well, that brings us to the next thing. You want to talk about some players that have moved this week. This was one of them.
Yeah, Jawan Williams, like this time of the year, it's not. You'll see it where a few fringe players get moved around on the bottom end of the roster, and that happened this week with the Minnesota Vikings. And we mentioned it because sometimes these pickups are end up being more important than we think initially. Jawan Williams getting released was not important, but it ended up creating a roster opening that the Vikings filled by bringing back our old buddy James Lynch along the defensive line.
Your breakout player, 3 years
that's
in a
right.
row.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Him and Irv Smith every year, breakout player. But last year, Lynch's season didn't get off the ground because he tore his ACL in training camp, I believe. Didn't play, was done for the season. I didn't think that the Vikings would bring him back. But when they had this roster hole, and the fact that the Vikings, defensive line-wise, they did not address it in the draft. And when they lost out on the Christian Wilkins sweepstakes, they didn't really address it in free agency. Completely, other than they brought in some lesser known guys, and that's how the Vikings have been attacking defensive line. I think overall is that you've only got one player outside of Harrison Phillips who's making who's set to make more than $2.75 million next year, and everybody else they're bringing in are low rent vets that to add some depth, and that they're hoping one of those guys are going to emerge and play better than the Vikings think that their previous career performance suggests that they will play. So they did that. That's why they're bringing in Jerry Tillery. That's why they signed Jonah Williams. That's why they re-signed Jonathan Bullard. That's why they have signed James Lynch. They're hoping they're going to strike a little bit of gold with one of these guys who won't cost you much. You're only signing for a year, and maybe you get one or two of them become a nice solid rotational guy, and again play better than you expect, and you get something out of them. And if you lose out on a big name player like Christian Wilkins, you don't address it in the draft and pick an impact player on the defensive line. This is how you fill out the roster and try to create some depth and some maybe a little bit better performance from your defensive line, is by signing guys like James Lynch. Lynch is, unfortunately, he's never been able to recreate the kind of play he had at Baylor his last couple of years, where his senior year he was the Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year. I think he had 13 sacks that year, got picked in the 4th round. There were some questions about whether his performance could transfer over to the NFL because he's not quite big and explosive enough, and it just hasn't happened for him at the NFL level so far. But maybe, and then again, he's going to be up for a contract after this year. Maybe this is the year with a little bit more opportunity where that happens for him. Or maybe it happens for Jerry Tillery, or maybe it happens for Jonah Williams. But again, they're stacking up, adding some guys to the depth chart, hoping for the best, I think. And James Lynch is one of those examples. I'm not very optimistic that Lynch will be on the team for long. I don't think that he's got a great chance of making the team, but it's up to him to show that, and he's going to get a lot of chance if he stays healthy in training camp and preseason to prove that he is worth keeping around and that he can actually be a valuable piece along to the defensive line and to this Brian Flores defense.
I agree, and I think one of the reasons where these guys can be valuable is if they increase the rotation cadence.
Yes.
Keep them fresh. keep them, the offensive line stays the offensive line all game, and you could literally wear them out. And if you're running in, if all your defensive tackles are, within this range of good, run them all in. Boop, boop, boop,
Yeah.
Keep them fresh, right? And that extra fresh and push can wear down that offensive line so you're winning in the fourth quarter. That's when you're making the biggest push. You don't have the, the deep tech or 3-tech that can you just blow up the middle like we wish we had, or the nose guard, nose tackle type that can stop a freight train. You don't have that with the Vikings setup right now. So what I think they're doing is that let's get a whole bunch of people in there and, keep these guys going at 100 miles an hour so that the offensive line can't catch their breath.
I think that's a great point, Dave. I hadn't thought of that, but you're right. If you can rotate guys in and out, keep their snap counts low, because again, they're all kind of the same performance level. But maybe you don't. In the fourth quarter, late in the third quarter, fourth quarter, these guys aren't winning because they're more skilled than the offensive linemen. They're winning and beating them because they're fresher and they got more of a bounce off the snap and can beat tired offensive linemen who have been playing all game and banging around these guys. So that is a very good point, and I hope that is how it works out.
And it also means the offensive linemen have to prep for more players, defensive players. It's not just I got to go against this one guy, so I'm going to learn him all week. No, I got a dozen I got to go against. Holy crap. It's that sort of thing too. So hopefully it works. It's going to be that melding. Yeah. Do we want superstars that could, push the pocket, and that nose tackle that can stop anything? Yes, I want those too. But not having those, let's go this way and just bombard them. Boom, 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 boom. Little hit after little hit. Jab, 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 jab.
Yeah, jab, jab, jab to the body blows throughout the game. And Ginkel Roy, the second-year guy from LSU, is another guy that's going to factor into this rotation. And we'll see what kind of push improvement he makes in year two. Maybe not a spectacular, exciting way to deal with this positional unit, but again, sometimes you have limited amount of financial resources, limited amount of draft capital that you have, and sometimes you have to make some tough choices on other units. And in this type of defense that Brian Flores runs, we've seen it, is that the defensive linemen are not the marquee players in that. So I'm sure he would like some, but I think he's found a way to make this work without having an Aaron Donald on his defensive line.
Exactly. And he's going to have to continue this year.
Yes, he will.
But I suspect 2025, he's going to get that type of player. And it's going to be sweet. But let's get through this year, and he's going to try to maximize everything as possible this year. And so the Vikings surprise everybody. Now, we got another player we signed this week. A former Packer.
What else is new? Robert Tonyan, I think he was signed on Wednesday. The word came out that he got signed to the Vikings. If you look up Tonyan, this was an interesting signing. Last year he was with the Bears, was stuck behind Cole Kmet, so really didn't get much done. But if you look up his stuff, in 2020, Robert Tonyan had 53 catches for over 500 yards and 11 touchdown catches, which is like some big-time fat production from a tight end. 2021, he blew out his ACL early in the season in October, didn't play again, but did come back in 2022 with that team from Wisconsin again, and then he caught 52 passes, only 2 touchdown catches, but still that's a sizable amount of pass catches for a tight end. And he's no spring chicken, Dave, 30 years old, but if you look at his career, he's got 148 career catches and basically missed all, 3/4 of a season in one of those in 6 years. Whereas the Vikings previous top pass catching tight end without TJ Hawkinson was going to be Johnny Munt, we thought, who has 46 career catches in 7 NFL seasons. So Tonyan's a clear upgrade on the pass catching side of things. Compared to Munt, I think Tonyan has a reputation as, yes, Sarah, it was 4 years ago. We're hoping there's a repeat there. But I think that with Tonyan and his past record, he has a better track record of being a guy who can be a factor in the passing game compared to Johnny Munt, who has never been a factor in the passing game, or even Josh Oliver, who is clearly a hell of a blocker, but his pass catching ability, he's never shown what he showed at San Jose State at the NFL level. So, I think the Vikings are looking at this. We know TJ Hawkinson at least we felt was the best case scenario was he was going to come back at the beginning of October. Out of September, he would not be playing in those first 4 games. Best case scenario is he would be back from his knee injuries for the first game in October, but maybe things aren't looking that way right now, and the Vikings felt they needed to beef up the tight end room a bit more and add somebody with better pass catching ability than what they have to keep the offense as dangerous as we're hoping there would be. This pickup, so I feel it's going to be at a reasonable cost here, obviously, to get to Tonyan. So I feel it's a nice pickup. No harm in getting him, and the pickup does make me wonder, though, Dave, about TJ Hawkinson and how his recovery is going. Because I think if a guy like Tonyan, having him as a number 2 guy or 2A, if Oliver's going to be on the field a lot blocking-wise, and when Hawkinson gets back, he's going to be on the field a lot all the time because he's TJ Hawkinson. Why would you sign Tonyan if that was going to be a 3 or 4 game thing? It feels like they're adding him for insurance in case Hawkinson is out for much longer than that, than we want to see, maybe 7 or 8 games. So, and that does worry me a bit. If the Vikings know something, they would know a lot about TJ Hawkinson's recovery and how it's progressing so far. And maybe it's going to take longer for him to get back into the lineup than we were hoping.
Well, hoping, but we did talk about it may take till December before he gets back. And so This makes sense. And that would leave Tonyan, Oliver, Munt, and Muse in the room, and Hawkinson on IR. And then once Hawkinson's ready to come back, then you can deal with which one of those guys you want to get rid of at that point. And I think that's why one of the reasons they went and grabbed him. Now, he is 1 year younger than Johnny Munt, if I remember correctly. I think Munt's 31.
No, I think Munt's 29, but there's a few. Munt's a little younger, but not by much.
Okay.
Gaetano below said that he doesn't expect TJ to be back until November, and hopefully that is not the case, but that's certainly a possibility.
Mm-hmm. Now, of course, we keep hearing, hey, he's ahead of schedule. Well, if schedule is December and ahead of schedule is November, that may be.
Yes.
Still, a lot of football gets played before then.
It does. And the Vikings offense is certainly going to be more dangerous the sooner TJ Hawkinson is part of that offense than without him. Although Norfius he's pumping up Josh Oliver's tires below in the comments. And we do know his senior year at San Jose State, he had 60 catches, well over 700 yards. Just has never been able to replicate that at the NFL level. But credit to him, he was not, I think, known for his his blocking chops at San Jose State, and that's where he's earned his money at the NFL level. But college-wise, he's shown an ability to be a pass-catching threat. And maybe this is the year it happens.
Could be. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to find out. I think you have Hawkinson here, and then I think the next bunch of guys is like the defensive line. They're all in this area of quality. So
yeah,
and who knows? Maybe they start a rotation. Somebody on the offense rotates besides some wide receivers. We'll find out. That brings us to theme 2. Get more picks. How do we do that?
Yes, Dave. Well, to sum things up, we don't have a whole lot of them for the 2025 drafts, but and that's worrisome for me. It's worrisome for other Viking fans. Right now, we've got 4 picks going into the 2025 draft: a first, 2 fifths, and then reportedly, although it's not official yet, and we won't know until I think next March or something, how the compensatory picks are going to work out. But it based on the formulas that certain outlets have, it looks like we get a 3rd round comp pick along with those other 3 that we have. But that's not nearly enough. I think most people would agree. And so, but and Kwesi Adofo-Mensah has some work to do with all the wheeling and dealing he did in this draft, trading away a lot of picks. Is he satisfied with just going in with 4 going into the 2025 draft? I don't think that he is, but there are ways that he can, I think, add some draft capital to that. The first one is, hey, we do have that first rounder in the 2025 draft. And that's all. First rounder is always very valuable. If you look at, let's say right now, and I don't think it's much of a stretch, we already talked about it in the first segment, but if you look at the Vikings, say with the quarterback situation being what it is, let's say that they get in that 6-7 win range in 2024. Depending on how other teams do, that could have the Vikings in the top 10 picking in 2025. And that's an area where, just like the Vikings did, some teams that are behind them in the draft order are looking. They will be looking to possibly trade up and get a player that they covet. Could be a quarterback, could be some other wide receiver or defensive player. And I think that in this case, much like look at what the Vikings did. They traded it from 11 to 10 with the Jets, gave up a 4th rounder to do that, and then again, when they saw the chance to get Dallas Turner, they moved up from 23 to 17, gave up a 4th and a 5th next year, plus I think a 5th this year, plus the 23rd. So that is a way. The first round pick, if the Vikings want to put it up for offer, some team is looking to move up and get a player that they covet. Kwesi Adofo-Mensah can add some draft capital on day 2 or day 3 with that first rounder to beef up the 2025 draft. That's one way to do it. Now, there's some other ways. You can do it by using some of your spare parts on your team right now to add some picks in that they're not going to get you day 2 picks or really day 1 picks, but they could get you some in day 3. And right now the Vikings only have 2 5th rounders into the 2025 draft, so nothing in the 6th, nothing in the 7th. So I think Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is going to be looking to beef up the amount of picks he has on day 3 as well. A couple of players that potentially, some of those spare parts that we're looking at. Will Raggett's kind of dealt with this with Sports Illustrated earlier in the week. He talked about Pat Jones, the second, our edge rusher, as being a guy who could potentially be somebody you could trade right now because we drafted Dallas Turner, because we signed Van Ginkel and Greenard. The Vikings, depending on how Andre Carter does, depending on how Gabe Murphy shows out as an undrafted rookie free agent, the Vikings might not have a need for a veteran like Jones. But now Jones, as in his career, he's coming off, I think, a poor 2023, but he has played a fair number of snaps in a rotational role. He's still not even 26 years old, and he'd be still on his rookie contract this year. If he's still... And he's got, I think, he has 4 career sacks right now in 3 seasons. As a guy who has shown that he can handle a rotational role, and some other teams feeling that he's young, still could get better, I could see where the Vikings could potentially get, a 7th rounder for him, for a team that's looking to add some depth at the edge rusher position for Jones. Another guy that could potentially spare part that the Vikings could potentially look at getting a day 3 pick for would be a Caleb Evans. This is another guy that Raggett's mentioned. You look at a Caleb Evans. Again, he's only 25 right now. He has fairly extensive starter experience as a rookie and as a second-year player. not coming off a great 2023. He got benched late in the season, and with the Vikings right now, they drafted Mekhi Blackman last year. They signed Shaq Griffin this year. They've got signed Byron Murphy last year. They just drafted Kyrie Jackson in the 4th round. There's a lot of guys right now that are ahead in the depth chart. I think ahead of Caleb Evans, and he might be looking for a change of scenery. And in a league where everybody's looking for more cornerbacks, Evans could be a guy who, again, teams could be interested in because he's 6'2", he's long, he's got the size that teams like. He has starter experience. And at times he's flashed the ability to make some plays on the ball, and he's shown some promise, but he just hasn't done it often enough. Again, he's a guy potentially you could get the 7th rounder for if there is a team that doesn't feel very confident about their depth at the cornerback position. But again, it would also depend on how comfortable the Vikings feel about the depth at their corner position, whether they're willing to give up a Caleb Evans. So a lot of that's going to depend on how Jackson looks in preseason, I think, as well as Mekhi Blackman and even Shaq Griffin. If Flores feels that those guys plus Byron Murphy are good, he might be. Then the Vikings could be in business with trading a Caleb Evans and getting a 7th rounder, a late day 3 pick for him again to restock the draft cupboard a bit. A couple other guys we're going to talk about. Drew just mentioned them below: Andrew Booth and Lewis Cine. I've mentioned them before. These are 2 guys highly drafted, pretty well regarded coming into the 2022 draft. They've done nothing at the NFL level, Dave, which has been very disappointing. But Lewis Cine is only 24. Andrew Booth is only 23. Again, high draft picks. The Vikings weren't the only team that thought these guys were worth drafting in the 1st and 2nd round. There's other teams that would have drafted them in that range too. And there's probably other teams that still feel right now that in the right situation, the Vikings have been idiots developing these guys. They need a fresh start. Hey, if we can get these guys on dirt cheap for a 6th rounder or a 7th rounder, we're willing to take a chance on them this year and bring them in with our coaching staff in a better situation, and we'll get great value out of those guys. I could see the Vikings playing these guys. Lewis Cine and Andrew Booth are going to play a lot in preseason, Dave. We're going to see them a lot because I think the Vikings are going to be showcasing these guys and looking to see if they can entice a team to give up a day 3 pick, 6th rounder, 7th rounder, likely a 7th rounder, something for either Lewis Cine or Booth, or maybe both. In that case,
or if they make the argument that they should stay and fight for that starting position.
Yep, that's right.
Make them it's real simple. It's up to them. For Lewis Cine, if it's learning the playbook and how to read the playbook and digest the playbook, and we all saw when there's a couple of the quarterback gurus came out with, hey, former quarterbacks, this is what a rookie quarterback has to learn. Now, granted, a defensive back doesn't have to learn all of that, but they've got to learn a ton of it. And they've got to be able to digest that. And if Lewis Cine, the reported rumors is he has a hard time with the playbook. Well, if he's suddenly mastered it, right, then take your step and fight for what you feel is yours. Same with Booth. If Booth feels he's being shorted because other guys have moved up ahead of him, buddy, take your step. Go through, get extra coaching, go through extra drills, go through everything you could possibly think of to make yourself indispensable to the Minnesota Vikings. Make it hard for them. If you guys can do that, you'll secure yourself a spot on the team. Otherwise, like you said, Kwesi may go, hey, anybody need a corner? How about a safety that quasi plays linebacker? Anybody? And the Jets may say, yeah, we do. All right, throw us a 7th for next year, and here you go. That's how I see it developing.
Yeah, it could very well be. One other guy, we're going to talk about him in the next segment too, that also I think has some value, could get you a day 3 pick, would be Nick Mullins at quarterback. We'll get into that later. But overall, I think if the Vikings I think there's ways with the players and the draft picks I've mentioned, that there's a way that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah can acquire 3 or 4 more draft picks in the 2025 draft. Again, some of them they won't all be in the second, third, and fourth round, but there are ways that we can get those 7 and 8 picks to have a more fulsome draft in 2025 than right now, looking at 4 picks and not very many of them in the top 100, top 150 range either.
Mm-hmm. And if somebody goes down due to injury, the price goes up.
Yes.
That 7th may turn into a 6, or a 6 into a 5th, a 5th to a 4th, and you can hold the other team over a barrel because you go, hey, I got 6 of them here. I'll give you this one for a 4th.
Yep.
You got to be fortunate. It's sort of out of the way. It sort of plays out like the Eagles were fortunate when we had a trade for Sam Bradford, and they raked us over to Coles for that trade. But it's all going to be interesting to see how it plays, because I do think Kwesi wants to get a few picks. Now, do I care about 6th and 7th round picks? They generally do not turn out to be anything for the most part. It's rare that they do. And I really don't care. I'd rather go quality versus quantity. I want to try that approach because we've done the quantity thing, and you draft 15 players and 7 of them don't even make the team. Like, you just wasted the draft picks. If you'd have moved up instead of back, I had higher quality and a better chance to make the team and produce better on the field. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But
that's also where having the more picks helps you, Dave, of course, as you say, because if you only have 4, like, what are you using to move up? Right. in a lot of cases, right? Like,
next year,
you don't have that. Yeah, that's right. If we keep on, mortgaging the future draft picks to move up in this draft, that's not really the best way to do business either. It's okay to do that every once in a while, but I don't think you want to be, dipping into your future draft capital all the time to make up for stuff that you've done, the draft picks that you traded away in your current draft.
Yep. Could be. Well, that brings us to theme 3, the one everybody's been waiting for. We're going to talk about the quarterback room. And yes, I got a picture from inside Egan of that.
Yeah. With the Ouija boards.
The throne. The candles burning. The incense. Yes. But.
Yeah. Bringing up the quarterback room because we talk on this show, or at least Dave, all the past couple of years, about always concerns about the Vikings' depth at various positions. Don't have enough depth. If the one guy goes down, who's going to step in and provide capable play? I think the quarterback room is actually kind of interesting to me because I think it's one of the more we've got pretty good depth there compared to some other positional units on the team. A little bit uncertain about how great the depth is, but we do have depth, and I think that if you're for Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and Kevin O'Connell, it's going to be. I think it's interesting now that we've got 4 guys. You got J.J. McCarthy, Sam Darnold, Nick Mullins, and Jaron Hall all in the quarterback room right now. And I just wonder how the Vikings are going to handle that. And I think that there's a way that I would handle it if I'm them. I just don't know if that's the way the Vikings feel about it. But when you look at that quarterback room, of course, J.J. McCarthy, he ain't going anywhere. He's going to be the starter. It's just a matter of when that's going to happen. This year, season opener, after the bye this year, or in 2025, or sometime later in 2024. We don't know, but he'll be the starter sooner, eventually, maybe sooner rather than later. If he's not the starter this season, it's going to be Sam Darnold, who isn't going anywhere either, at least not for this year, I don't think. But beyond that, what's going to happen? I think you've got you drafted Jaron Hall last year in the 5th round, and he was going to be. You draft him as a developmental guy, somebody that hopefully in year 2, year 3, maybe year 4, he becomes something, a good backup, a spot starter, hell, maybe even your starter. Who, that was the thinking when they drafted him. He had promise. but and then you got Nick Mullins, who's backed up Kirk Cousins for 2 seasons, and has been a backup at other spots in San Francisco, with Cleveland in the past, and has shown he's a capable backup. I'm just kind of wondering, again, what are the Vikings going to do here? Because you can't keep all 4. And this season, I don't think, if you cut Mullins and try to put him on the practice squad, that's not going to happen. I think, Jaren Hall might get scooped off their practice squad eventually as well. But during training and during preseason training camp, you got these 4. Well, J.J. McCarthy, how much run are you giving him in preseason? He does need some. How are you going to balance protecting him from injury, but also making sure he gets enough reps and snaps in preseason against other players, against other teams, so that he's ready and developing the way you want him to? Sam Darnold, he's a vet, 6 years in the league. Maybe he doesn't need a lot of preseason action, but if he's going to be your starter to start the season, I think, considering he barely played last year in San Francisco, I think you'd want to see him run and get a lot of reps in preseason as well. So what's that going to leave Nick Mullins and Jaren Hall? All right. I feel that Mullins he doesn't need any preseason time. We have seen he's a veteran. We've seen that he can go with very little preseason play and jump in and play and
throw
play
for
capably.
300 to 400 yards.
Yeah,
he'll throw interceptions, but yes, he's productive.
He is productive. But I think that he's a guy that's too good to be your number 3. And the feeling, I think, what I've read in a few cases is that people don't feel Jaren Hall is going to make the team because he's just not better than Nick Mullins and the other guys right now. That may be true, but personally, I'd like to keep Hall because of that developmental aspect. He's 3 years younger than Nick Mullins. Potentially, he could be a better player than Nick Mullins with a little bit more development time. I'd rather keep him and try to get, like we said earlier in the previous segment, and try to get Nick Mullins, trade Nick Mullins to a team who at the end of preseason is really worried about their quarterback play. They don't have a capable backup quarterback, just like the Vikings were in 2022 when they weren't happy with Kellen Mond. They knew they couldn't go with Kellen Mond and Sean Mannion as their backups, so they ended up trading to the Raiders and getting Nick Mullins as a backup for a conditional 7th rounder. And Mullins only helped Mullins helped his stock last year, even though he threw a lot of interceptions, but he averaged well over 300 yards per game in 3 starts. The Vikings lost them all, but it wasn't all his fault. And I think he showed that you put him in there, he can move the offense. No matter who he's playing with, he can he can hit receivers, he can move the ball, he'll score some points. Yeah, there'll be some bonehead decisions made and maybe a couple of ill-advised throws, but in a short span, if you're a pretty good team and you've got Nick Mullins as your backup quarterback and he has to play a game or 2, I think he can keep you in a position where you've got a chance to win the game. He did that for the Vikings last year. And I think that has trade value more than Jaren Hall would. And he's a guy that I think the Vikings got to look at and say at the end of the season or at the end of the preseason, start making some calls on teams who are jittery about their backup quarterback situation. Say, hey, Nick Mullins, he might be available. 6th rounder for Nick. What do you say, boys?
Yeah, could be. Now, what I like about Nick Mullins, he doesn't play scared. Drew, that was one big thing with Drew for a long time. The team played scared. And Nick Mullins does not play scared. He does not have that genetic makeup. He is not afraid of anything. He's going out there and gun away. And I like that in a quarterback. And that's a good thing. Now, if I'm thinking they keep all 4 and they try to shuffle Hall off to the practice squad, I don't think Hall gets sniped by some other team. I don't think he's good enough. There's plenty of other, developmental 5th round, 6th round quarterbacks that are out there floating in the ether that somebody can grab and not worry about it. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see. All I really care about is Sam Darnold and J.J. McCarthy, right? Now, we're going to see these guys in the preseason, obviously, but I care about Sam Darnold and J.J. McCarthy because that's who I expect to start this season at different points in time. Now, when J.J. starts, I don't know. I literally don't know. I've seen all sorts of stuff from week 1 on to, the 3-game homestand at the late end of the season, or not at all. So it's going to be interesting to me to see those two players. That's the ones I really care about. And does Nick Mullins, still throw without fear? Does Darren develop any further? Can he be the quarterback that Tyler fell in love with? I don't know. But my biggest priorities are the top 2. So that's all I'm putting my energy into for now. We'll see what happens during the summer, but for now.
Yeah. Yes, and what the Vikings are going to do with Mullins and Hall in particular is really going to be dependent, I think, on what they show in OTAs and in the preseason. And I guess particularly Hall, if he shows he's really taken a leap as far as understanding the playbook, making the right decisions, playing faster, being more decisive and accurate and making the right decisions, and Kevin O'Connell and Wes Phillips and Josh McCown are very pleased with his development, then they're going to look to keep him any way possible. But if that doesn't happen, then he's probably looking at getting cut and stick him on the practice squad if you can, and hope he doesn't get poached by some other team.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And if they're willing to trade, let Kwesi deal. So that brings us to the end of the show today. That's amazing. We didn't have any audio issues that I'm aware of. Great. Thankfully. I'm hearing a couple little buzzes, but I can clear that up for the podcast. I want to thank absolutely everybody that's been here today and chatting. You guys have been on fire. We love it. We love sharing your Minnesota Vikings with you. And it's absolutely wonderful that we sit here and we're getting all excited because OTAs are on our doorstep. We're going to start to see these players more and more. And I'm going to get pictures of them in Vikings gear, which I like. So,
indeed. Yeah, I really want to thank everybody for coming on today. I really feel privileged that we actually have people who take time out of their Sundays to watch us gab about the Vikings and stick around for the whole hour, sometimes hour plus. So thank you, everybody.
Yep. Any last words there, buddy?
The only last words is, like you said, OTA is coming up, so we'll start to hear a bit more about particularly the rookie class, I think, and of course the talk about Justin Jefferson is going to heat up to contract extension. When does it happen? Is this the week that the rumored extension gets signed? Because now the schedule is out for the NFL, so there's no big news to reveal, and maybe this is Jefferson's week to shine, to revel in being becoming the highest paid wide receiver in the NFL for a few minutes.
Could be, but there's rumors he's still waiting on, was it the guy from Dallas?
Oh, yes. Yeah, CD Lamb.
But who knows? Who knows? And then I've also heard rumblings it might be after July 1st. Because that's the way the Vikings do it. I always hate that excuse. We've always done it this way. Call a guy and say, hey, I need a part and some people. Well, we'll get it to you tomorrow. No, I need it now. No, we don't do it that way. We've been doing it this way since Vietnam. Dude, it's 2008. Move your ass. We do it this way now. So with that, what do we say, buddy?
We say SKOL Vikings, baby.
SKOL Vikings. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell. And rate us on your favorite podcast aggregator. Darren and Dave, thank you for watching this episode of Two Old Bloggers. We look forward to seeing you on every show on the new Vikings First and SKOL. You can find our podcasts as part of the Fans First Sports Network. Sports takes for the fan, from the fan. SKOL, everybody!